Okay, so now we have a edit of all the conversation which took place regarding the blue badge holder issue and the disabled residents and their carers issue. First of all, we have the public question from Dan Fulton, who raises the point that the definition of authorised vehicle in the proposed order is different to the way that they define it in the officer's report. And then we have the testimony of Margaret Collins, who lives along Mill Road with a disabled son, who tells us how difficult it is generally to take part in not only consultations but society in general, and how she's going to be affected by the TRO. And then the significant portion of this video, some 40 minutes, is taken up by the members of the committee grilling the officers over how the blue badge exemption is supposed to work and trying to clarify whether carers or multiple carers or family members of disabled residents will or will not be able to be exempt and how that's going to work. Now, I was sitting in the meeting that day, and I have to tell you, it was quite excruciating to watch. And I've watched this video back twice now, and I have to say I'm really still unclear about what exactly this policy is going to entail, other than just basically leaving it as an open-ended thing where the officers say, we'll work it out as we go along. Now, I just want to point out that this relates to what I was trying to point out with the quashed order from the last judicial review. Because of the fact that we have a different definition in the statement of reasons and the proposed order and the officer's report, which are not clear, and then the meeting itself is filled with 40 minutes of roundabout, very difficult to understand clarification, which doesn't really clarify anything. I'm concerned that the same problem is going to happen later if this becomes an issue at judicial review. They're not going to be able to show that they did clarify or what the policy is actually going to be. And because the officer's report is the only thing that there is to go on, I'm worried that this is actually going to become the new sticking point for this TRO, which might end up with it being quashed again. And that's actually what I was trying to point out earlier, but the chair wasn't letting me speak. So anyway, watch this and see if you can make heads and tails of it, because I haven't been able to.
Mr. Fulton, are you with us?
Yes, I am. Thank you, Chair.
Hello. Yeah, we can see and hear you fine. So I think you just heard the rules around timing. Obviously, you're online, so you can't see the traffic light system, but I'll give you a heads up when you're nearing the end.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I was supposed to speak today in support of the Council's approach to disability exemptions. However, discrepancies between the text of the order and the officer's report have left me with a number of concerns. Under the Equality Act, the Council has a continuing and anticipatory duty owed to disabled people generally to make reasonable adjustments to avoid disabled people being placed at a substantial disadvantage in comparison with people who are not disabled. The language in the draft order itself appears to conform with the Council's obligations, specifying that additions to the designated vehicle list are to be made on a discretionary basis by the Council. However, the officer's report and the equality impact assessment refer only to exemptions registered by blue badge holders, and in doing so seem to refer to the last traffic regulation order, which has now been quashed. There's no mention of blue badges in the current order, and so it is unclear how or why reasonable adjustments for disability should be restricted to two exempt vehicles identified by a blue badge holder. A person can suffer a substantial disadvantage due to disability without qualifying for a blue badge. Furthermore, the officer's report misdirects the committee as to the provisions of the draft order, stating at paragraph 3.25 that, quote, exemptions are set out in the proposed TRO, including registered vehicles of blue badge holders. It would be extremely helpful if the Council could amend its public-facing statements to reflect that additions to the designated vehicle list for reasons related to disability are to be made on a discretionary basis in accordance with the Council's reasonable adjustment duty and in accordance with the actual words of the order itself. Thank you very much, Chair.
From committee members? No, I don't see any, so that was very clear. So, Mr. Day, thank you very much for joining us this morning and sharing your views. Next, we're going to move on to Margaret Collins, who I believe is with us in the room. Ms. Collins. Good morning. So take your time to get settled. There's a button in the center at the bottom of the microphone that switches it on and off. And as with other speakers, you'll have 3 minutes to give your views to the committee. And then if you could stay seated at the end in case there are any questions of clarity from the committee members to yourself. So please take your time whenever you're ready. The big one in the middle at the bottom, it's got a picture of a face on. There you go, it's on.
Hello, I'm Margaret Collins. I live one side of the bridge and my disabled son lives the other side of the bridge. He's in supported living with 24/7 care and the care's not going very well. And I'm developing mobility issues as well. First, I want to say it's very onerous being a family carer. At the moment, I'm spending, you won't believe it, 50 hours a week on direct and indirect support for my son because things are going so badly. Since he's moved, I've spent at least 35 hours a week. I have my own health issues. It's the only onerous area of being a family carer over the years. It means that it's very difficult to participate in the democratic process at all. So I have missed a lot of these consultations that went on. I didn't even know they were happening. I think you should have written letters to at least every resident in the city. A lot of people don't have the internet, don't read local papers, don't listen to local television or whatever, radio, so they won't have known. So it's been a real struggle to get here today. I have not been able to read all the papers. I've read what I did. I put in a representation. It was last minute and rushed. And I put in a last minute thing about what I wanted to say today. And that was rushed. So I haven't done a 3-minute preparation. Carers. My son needs 24/7 care. The 2 blue badge limit is going to be quite onerous. You won't be able to change carers quickly. It's going to say at least 3 working days. We've had previous problems with the station issuing fines after the carer has been legally registered, so we don't go to the station anymore with the carer's vehicle. It won't work very well, the blue badge exemption. It's also very hard to get a blue badge. The renewal of my son's blue badge, he's had one since he was 5. The renewal last time when he was 23 took 40 hours of my time and an appeal, and the council would not share what I wrote and what the specialist report was. It's very hard work, and when you're a carer, you need this like a hole in the head. A lot of disabled people don't have blue badges at all. And I'm just desperate. And we lose carers because they can't afford to get to work in their cars. We've lost several that way. And you're going to make it harder for them. And even if registered as a blue badge vehicle, they're not going to be able to travel over the bridge to get to work. So what am I going to do? We're going to lose more of them. The quality of care is already bad. And by the way, your exemptions mitigation thing, you say you haven't got the resources to widen up the case, to do the work of widening up the case eligibility, but you're talking about a case-by-case basis for age, disability, etc.
Madam, I'm sorry to cut you off. We have
got the resources.
We have reached the end.
Okay, you haven't got the resources.
Okay, that's it. Sorry, madam, if you could stay seated, actually, there are some questions of clarity for you, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So we have Councillor Hunt, please.
Thank you very much. There's a couple of questions I'd like for clarity to ask you. Did I hear you say that you had no knowledge of a consultation?
Remember, we signed one survey. I put a response in on my behalf, and I also filled one in on behalf of my son because I speak for him. I'm his informal advocate. He can't speak. He can't read or write. He doesn't know what a survey is. He doesn't know what an election is. But
the results of the survey, of course, are important to him.
Yeah.
And are there many people in your similar situation in your area?
The lady who lives opposite me is
Uh,
terminally ill.
I mean,
And that's-
what I'm saying is you're not alone in your circumstances.
No, I'm not. No.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, madam. I think that's all the questions for you. So thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, officers, for the report, and particularly thank you today for those people who came along as public speakers and told us a great deal we didn't know about before. I'm not ignoring that, but I'm reading my prepared piece so I don't ramble. I have two questions regarding the impact of this proposed TRO on people living with disabilities or illness. And how will the proposed system of exemptions or other authorised vehicles work for them in practice? Firstly, there are disabilities and illnesses which limit a person's mobility, which they currently overcome by making their journeys by private car, either as drivers or as passengers. This includes a variety of sensory impairments, mobility limitations, and psychological conditions. We have read many survey responses from people in this category and heard from them today as well. For example, from those wanting to access places of worship, recreation, or therapy close to the Mill Road Bridge. The question is, will the vehicles they currently use be eligible to go on the council's list of exempt vehicles, which we are told will be determined on a case-by-case basis at the council's discretion? It is easy to see how individuals within these groups will be able to arrange matters by nominating vehicles which are used regularly for giving lifts, so that the people involved will be able to continue to attend the sessions which are so important for their health and well-being. However, I want to draw attention to the system which applies to blue badges. This is a parking law, remember, for permits for organisations. The government guidelines say, and I'm sure you've read this, but I will for the sake of this meeting, the issuing local council will decide whether the organisation has a clear need for an organisational badge rather than using the individual badges of the people it is transporting. An organisational badge must only be displayed when someone who would be eligible for a blue badge in their own right is being transported. Common examples of organisations that may be eligible include residential care homes, hospices, or local council social services departments. As we have seen in recent years, it is common for life to be made very difficult for the organisations who provide services for people with disabilities if the county council insists, that, as they do, that the blue badges belonging to the individual passengers have to be displayed for a minibus to be allowed to park legally. In the case of this TRO, however, it is stated that vehicles need to be on the Cambridgeshire County Council's list to pass through the Mill Road bus gate. This is not a parking thing. This list is to be determined, as was mentioned by others from the public here, on a case-by-case basis at the council's discretion. And I would certainly hope that we will be able to interpret this in the light of the county council's policy of health in all things. It does not have to be limited to blue badge holders. I would certainly not want to see an isolated person refused a seat with their friends on a minibus going over the bridge to the mosque or an art therapy group because they themselves did not qualify for a blue badge. We know how hard it is sometimes to get some people to come out of their homes and try out the services we offer. It would certainly not make sense if they then get in a car and drive there. I think we should trust the groups involved and add appropriate minibuses and community transport schemes to the list. We do trust people to be trusted partners for other things. We have a well-oiled system, certainly in Cambridge City. I do not expect an answer to this now, but if the TRA is approved, I urge officers to consider the practical implications for residential homes, faith groups and charities. I know that the City Council access officer will be able to advise from the casework which he has been involved in. This list must be drawn up by this council according to its policies and not by an independent agency such as the one we currently use for the blue badge parking scheme. Secondly, there is the impact of the TRO on people with disabilities who require services that currently come to them by private car, and that might well include their mother. The TRO specifies NHS tax exempt vehicles, presumably ambulances, but I'm not sure how this will apply to carers visiting a succession of clients in the Romsey area. Will an agency be able to apply for their carers' vehicles to go on the list? We've already heard how it can be a problem with this inevitable, an unavoidable change of vehicle. If there's a fine paid, that needs to be challenged on paperwork with the agency, which can be readily produced. I appreciate that this is complicated and it could be abused, but I believe that the many residents who've been writing to us come in today in support of the TRO would want to be helpful to their neighbours who need visits from carers. I note that at least one care agency has an office on Mill Road. If the decision is made to approve the TRO, I would like this committee to be able to make recommendations regarding the improvements to the public realm, which would be made possible, and I appreciate that comes later. But I will find it is a challenge for me to vote for this TRO if I think that it's going to be the blue badges mentioned by officers are not are taken to be the full answer to access and ability to move for people with disabilities.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Slatter. Very, obviously a topic that's close to your heart. So I'm going to ask officers if they want to reply to those questions raised.
Yeah, thank you. I would clarify that the exemptions are as set out in the report in terms of the exemptions, which relates to the registered vehicle of blue badge holders, registered vehicles of blue badge holders, and in terms of carers, as set out in the report, it could be the blue badge holder's own vehicle, or it could be indeed the vehicle of a carer.
Sorry, Chair, but there is mention of other authorised vehicles. They are the ones I'm concerned about.
Officers, any comments or any further comments? Frank?
Just wanted to add, so and it's also covered in the EQIA as well. So we've made it really clear in terms of the proposed reasonable adjustment is the proposed exemptions, because that's a clear scheme. It can be understood, and therefore we can be really clear to the committee how the reasonable adjustment would be made. But in the quality impact assessment, we also make it clear how we would engage with disability groups and those who are disabled and those with disabilities around how the process would work and how the scheme would work. So I think that's the other thing in terms of being clear around the actual scheme. We're also making it clear that we'll seek to do further engagement so that we can engage with those people so that they really understand how to get vehicles registered and how we can support them if this scheme is implemented.
Undertaking to engage with people with disabilities, that seems a bit indirect. We want it to know that when people apply, they will be assessed according to council policies. I don't believe that the access officer from the City Council has been involved in this yet, but that would be a very quick way of getting access to a great deal of casework and, I'm afraid, sad stories. But the blue badge scheme is a parking scheme. We need to go beyond that in terms of enabling the communities of Mill Road to get about.
I think the question is around, would people be judged on the council's policy? I think is the question.
So it would be so the blue badge process, we would follow the existing process for how we assess people to be included in the blue badge scheme. And as I've outlined, we'd provide that additional support and information and guidance to enable that process to be undertaken. So that's exactly how we would undertake it. But we need to be really clear that what's being proposed is using the blue badge scheme as the mechanism for providing that adjustment to support those with disabilities.
So the application for exemption is made how?
Jeremy, I think you're being volunteered for this one.
Yes. When the previous TRO was approved, an online system was set up which enabled people to register for permits, and I believe around about I think just fewer than 400 were registered at that point, although obviously that did not come into force as the TRO was not made with the challenge. However, we would be looking to reactivate that system and to publicise it through all relevant groups and county council channels, so that people would be able to go in again and register. Obviously, with people who don't have access to the internet, we'd be looking to go through groups to make sure those messages are disseminated and people do have every opportunity to do so.
Chair.
Okay, I mean, I think
You,
we've
Chair.
we've had the answer from the officers now. I don't think we're going to
No,
get any more than that.
Well, I just not, you're talking about permits. So this would be similar to, say, transponders when we had limited access to places in city centre. So individuals can apply for permits. Is that correct?
Individuals would register a vehicle which would be monitored by the ANPR system and therefore exempted from any penalty notices being sent out if they crossed over the bridge, those vehicles.
That's in
Okay.
addition to the blue badges, isn't it?
Yes. Okay. Well, David, you
Yes.
want to clarify?
I want some nonsense there
Final
before I
word on
vote
this
it.
point, I think.
It's not. It's as set out in 3.27 of the report.
There we go. I think we've got as far as we can with that one, I think. Okay. If we need to come back to that later, we can do. But I've got Councillor Bradnam next to speak.
Thank you, Chair. Point two questions first. I'll speak later in the debate, but I just wanted to be clear that for carers, just to be clear, for people who are living at home, sometimes they need 3 or 6 carers a day in order to cover the 24 hours. And these might be from a care agency or they might be informal. So I just wanted to be clear, how would carers in that scenario, would carers in that scenario be able to apply for exemption? Or are you expecting, if they work for a care agency, is the anticipation that the care agency will apply on their behalf? Or is it that they, in their, because they're often driving their private car, how is it expected that they will ensure that those carers don't get caught out? So that's, would you like, I've got 2 main queries of clarification.
Are they on the same point?
No, they're different.
Okay, so we'll take the answer to that one first, David.
Yeah, it is the blue badge holders that apply for the vehicles. Those properties are, of course, accessible without having to travel over the bridge, but the vehicles that relate to the exemption are those vehicles registered by the blue badge holder.
Sorry, but the blue badge holder might not have a car. Sorry, the client, the service user might not have a car and might not need to park. But are you saying, forgive me, this is my ignorance of the system, are you saying they need to apply for a blue badge on behalf of their carer, and suppose they have 6?
The blue badge holder, through the system that we that I just described, can register up to 2 vehicles, and that may be the vehicle of a carer.
No, but sorry, what I'm unclear about is the blue badge holder the service user of the care, or is it the carer who is the blue badge holder?
The blue badge, I don't want to sound, the blue badge holder is the blue badge holder, and the carer may be serving that blue badge holder in their vehicle that the blue badge holder is registered.
So the service user, the person who's disabled or needs a lot of care, and carers come to them, they have to apply for the blue badge. This is just query my understanding. You know, am I right in understanding that? Because these are the people who are, these might be suffering from all sorts of debilitating problems, or they might be relatively compos mentis but simply need some support. So the question is, if a service user requires a number, i.e. more than 2 carers, how do their carers, how do they make sure that their carers can get through?
There's 2 points. the service user can register up to 2 vehicles. And it may be that one of those vehicles is a carrier that is travelling over the bridge. Others have to undertake the longer journey. And then another point in terms of the support that the blue badge holders might need, as Frank said, the county council will support people through their application process in registering those vehicles.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think let's come back to that a bit later, I think. I've got, sorry, Councillor Bradley, you've got another point to make, then I'll come to other speakers.
The second one relates to community transport organisations. I'll just cite, for example, because it's local to me. I'm not saying they go over the Mill Road Bridge, but just I'm giving them as an example. But we have the beach car scheme in Waterbeach and Landbeach and Milton. And I'm not saying that they would go this way to Addenbrooke's, but suppose they needed to pick up somebody in the city on Mill Road. This is run by volunteers in villages who volunteer to take their car to enable people in local villages to be able to get to hospital appointments and such like. And so this is individual people offering their car for this service. So how are we just simply saying, well, they will have to go the long way round, or if they happen to have a client who the purpose of their visit is to get to somewhere in Mill Road, that they would have to go and come back and do the long journey round? Or are community transport systems, or indeed the dial-a-ride community bus service, would they be an exempted service, or two different things there? Sorry, dial-a-ride is a recognised system, but what about the volunteer drivers?
Yeah, they would not be explicitly exempt. The exempted vehicles are as set out in the paper. Those registered by blue badge holders.
That doesn't answer my question. Sorry. So I would have thought for something like dial-a-ride, the organisation would apply on their behalf for a blue badge for a community dial-a-ride bus.
Yeah, so I think the question is around the organisations, right? So it's
Yeah,
can an organisation apply
So can
for an exemption to cross the bridge or not?
apply? Yeah.
If we don't know that now, perhaps we could come back to that later if officers could find that out. So I think that's important. Obviously, a couple of
Because,
members here that we're
For
talking.
example, we have
Yeah, we understand. I think we understand what we mean.
care agencies, and the question is, do they have to apply on
Yeah,
behalf of
understood. Councillor Hay, I'm going to come to you now.
Before I go into my question, I will just clarify for Councillor Bradnam. My husband recently was issued with a blue badge, and it's the disabled person who the blue badge belongs to, not the carer. It can never be the carer. Always the
But
blue
that's
badge.
exactly the point I'm making, that it's the drivers who need to get to them. But anyway, here you go.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. I want to return to the issue of blue badges. The first point I want to ask officers probably to confirm rather than to check is, does the person who the blue badge is issued to have to be in the vehicle while it's travelling? So, for example, if somebody is going to look after somebody and doesn't have them in, that blue badge cannot be displayed. I think that's the legal situation on that one. And second of all, could you confirm that the county council policy states, and it's going to be useful for me to say in advance of that I'm reading off the screen here, it is unlikely that taxi or private hire operators and community transport operators would be eligible for an organisational blue badge. Thank you.
Okay, Jeremy, over to you for the detail.
Yes, Councillor Count, obviously you're reading from the County Council's policy position, so that is as it is. With regard to the point on organisations rather than individuals having vehicles on the County Council's permitted vehicle list, there is currently the ability of such organisations to come and talk to the county about their particular circumstance and for determination to be made if considered appropriate and in line with county policies. And I would suggest that one thing we might do with the Mill Road bus gate, if members make the decision to implement it, is consider whether we see multiple people with blue badges nominating the same vehicle, that is owned by a care agency or an individual working for a care agency, for example, thus giving us an idea actually of the level of demand and how that is represented through the care industry, and whether we would wish to consider amendments to our criteria with regard to care agencies and the registration of vehicles. I think that we do have perhaps a bit of flexibility there, that while we do not want to, if we make the decision to implement the scheme, lead to a decision where it's a free-for-all in terms of vehicles with the permission to go across the scheme. However, there may well be some flexibility beyond what is set out in the paper, but that could be determined through monitoring of the usage of the gate and the registration of vehicles.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Haythorne, I've got you next, and then Councillor Kindersley.
So yes, it's good to hear that there could be some degree of flexibility, and it does state council discretion in the papers. Councillor Howard, the local member, stated that there had been engagement with local groups, a process of local engagement, and that had been very effective. I think whatever policy the county council proposes, it will be possible to come up with counter examples for us to say, well, what happens if so-and-so happens to go from A to B? So as a process of that engagement, did the issues involving those with disabilities, did the proposal seem to be sufficient, or are we missing, I assume we're not missing loads of people from this process? Presumably the actual real issues came out in that process of engagement and are being addressed here. I think that's the question.
Okay, who wants to take that one?
So as I referenced previously, the issues in relation to those with disability, and also all equality issues, they are covered in the equality impact assessment, which makes it clear in terms of what we're proposing to do in terms of reasonable adjustment and the way that the scheme is proposed. So it is covered in the EQIA report, which is attached to the papers here. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kindersley.
Thank you, Chair. If someone is a paid carer for tens of clients who live all the way along Mill Road, Cambridge, do they get an exemption or do they not?
Yeah, so have we got any more clarity on this point yet? Yeah, do we need some more time? Okay, the question's been asked. Officers are going to go away and find out the answer and come back for you.
That, if I may, Chair, that is slightly distressing, because I'm not sure that there are members who are going to support this if the answer is no. I think that carers who are travelling up and down Mill Road, and I'm not suggesting there are hundreds of them, but I think that the time for the adjustment is probably before we make the decision rather than afterwards in relation to carers. And if I could just continue just for a moment, there has also been discussion about things like dial-a-ride and whether minibuses carrying people to and from various places would be included. Now, I thought minibuses probably fell under the bus definition that is referred to right at the beginning of the report, but I'm now starting to wonder. So I guess my second question is, are minibuses that are in the business of carrying people in order to get to places to be cared for included, yes or no?
Okay, should we come back to that one as well? Yeah, okay, so you will get an answer on that, Councillor. Councillor Count, please.
Yeah, we're still on the blue badge exemptions, so my questions may help us get to an answer. So assuming that somehow or another an exemption is granted, is the operation of the TRO we're considering today, is that exemption achieved by issuing an organisation a blue badge? And if they are then using the blue badge, I mean, theoretically, they might get it, they might not. But if they're using the blue badge as the exemption, does that automatically mean that they're not allowed to display it unless the people, some people who are disabled, that gained them that qualification are in the vehicle? So it cannot be used when the vehicle does not have the blue badge individuals.
So another question of detail on the blue badge or the exemption scheme there. Jeremy, you're indicating at me?
Yes, I think firstly, in relation to Councillor Count's question, I think technically with any blue badge, it should only be displayed when being used to transport or parked in service of a journey with the disabled person. So that is technically correct. In terms of the ability of our systems to monitor whether that person is in a vehicle or see whether there's a blue badge on the dashboard, for example, I think that we're talking about areas where we probably don't have that capability, but members have talked about we need to trust the system and trust individuals here. So I think there's a degree of that in there. And with regard to Councillor Kindersley's question about if there is a care agency providing care for 10 individuals, say, I think that is a circumstance where the discretion that the council has in regard to how the exemption or how the registered vehicles list is being used and whether there are cases for such as that where identification of such vehicles on the permitted vehicle list would be appropriate, would apply. And I think that is, as I said, in a circumstance, for example, where we had 7 of those 10 people registering that vehicle as one of their 2 vehicles, we might logically in that situation say, well, we need to just register it once as the care agency's vehicle rather than, register it again and again. But I think that is something we'll probably need to suck and see when we see how many blue badge holders we have registering vehicles and the discussions with the care industry in terms of whether it's causing them particular problems with numerous clients on either side of the bridge that need to be serviced each day. The other thing, of course, is there may be, for some cases, abilities to travel a different route in, or alternatively look at times of day that certain appointments are made. But I know from personal experience, for example, my mother needs visits at fixed times during the day, and there isn't necessarily that discretion. So that thing that is, again, I think it is a conversation that we do have the flexibility to have, through our traffic management team, with care agencies and other agencies at this point in time. So I think I can offer some reassurance there, although I would hesitate to commit to a definitive position because I think there's a lot of data will come out of the initial period if a scheme were implemented in terms of what level of registrations we're getting and what level of traffic over the bridge we're seeing.
So I think you're saying it's possible but discretionary.
It's possible but discretionary, but I don't think it is the intention, as seen by members' discussions around this table, to unduly penalise people who do need to travel. However, I think the balance that members need to be aware of is that if we loosen the reins too much on vehicles that can go over the bridge, you lose the benefit of any closure as perceived. So it's about getting that right balance. But the point on carers is obviously well made, and it is one that we do have some flexibility through the permitted vehicle list to address.
Okay. Same for the minibuses was the question.
Minibuses, if used for care uses, would potentially fall into that category. Minibuses as a general group of vehicles, no.
Sorry, sorry, if I may.
Councillor Bradnam.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Chair. I raised originally the point about Dial-A-Ride,
Yes.
which is a recognised organisation with volunteer drivers, but the organisation itself provides transport for the elderly and disabled who cannot use any other thing. I am hoping that you are going to use your discretion to enable vehicles such as Dial-A-Ride to go across the bus gate and not be penalised. Secondly, just to be clear, if you rely on the blue badge, and I appreciate, thank you very much, Mr. Smith, for the flexibility that you are indicating might be applied in the case of carers. If you are suggesting that a carer, by virtue of the, and thank you to Councillor Hay for reminding me that it's the client, the service user who has the blue badge guide and has to apply for it. So that means that a carer gets to them, goes in the house, picks up their blue badge and sticks it in the windscreen of their car wherever they're parked. And if that's a place that needs an exemption in order to park there. But that means, as Councillor Count has said, that in the journey, and this is the point I was making, that in the journey to that person's house, they would not be identified by virtue of a blue badge because they haven't necessarily got the person in the car. They might, if they're going there to take them to hospital, yes, then they would take the blue badge. But if they're going to offer them care in the home, we have palliative nurses, we have district nurses still going into people's homes. Hospice at home nurses, all sorts of things, not to mention, mothers and babies who need to have attention in home, all this sort of thing. I appreciate this is difficult, but it doesn't mean to say that we shouldn't look at it. And that's the reason why I made the point about care agencies. And for clarity, some indeed do travel in care agency branded vehicles, but many, many carers working for agencies work in their own cars. And so there's, I appreciate, sorry, Councillor Slatter, would you please stop interrupting? I'm trying to keep my train of thought. Thank you. The point being that carers need to be able to get to their service users, and we need to consider an appropriate, and I mean that in this technical sense of the word, an appropriate and proportionate way of enabling carers to get to their clients. And if that's through the bus gate, then so be it. We need to make that possible. I appreciate the flexibility that Jeremy Smith is indicating to us, but there's also the whole complexity of, as others have said, and the lady who spoke to us last with a son who was poorly and she needs to give care to, she may indeed possibly even have left by now, but this kind of regular day by day, going 2 or 3 times a day to a relative to look after them, that kind of care. Hopefully her son, she will have been able to apply for a blue badge on behalf of her son, for her son.
I think the question's been made. Should we
Yep,
hear
let's
from
move on.
Jeremy?
I mean, for clarity, a carer with a nominated vehicle travelling through the bus gate would be monitored on the automatic number plate recognition camera system, not on the basis of whether there was a blue badge in the vehicle. And the second point, I did not intend to include dial-a-ride minibuses or any type of any particular use of minibuses, other than to note that minibus is a class of vehicle and not all minibuses are used for care purposes. So it is not with regard to the minibus per se, it is regard to the particular use of the minibus that is relevant to that consideration.
So through you, Chair, are you clarifying then that dial-a-ride, for example, would become an exempted?
Dial-a-ride would be one of the organisations who we would be looking to engage with, or would be welcome those discussions on how the restriction affected them and whether exemptions on an organisational basis, or rather a number plate registered on the permitted vehicle list, would be appropriate in those circumstances. Yes.
Okay, and the final category which I mentioned was something like beach cars, where individual members of the public volunteer to take people in the volunteer's car to hospital appointments and that sort of thing. Let's hope they wouldn't go down Mill Road to get there. I wouldn't if I was taking somebody. But just to be clear, that they would not be exempt unless they applied and made a case for it. Is that right?
That is the case as it stands at the moment, but again, those discussions are welcomed by the council's team. I think in terms of, let's say trips to Addenbrooke's from Mill Road, it's going to be a relatively small number of properties in Petersfield that are probably most likely to require that. And it may be that if there are providers that provide specific trips in in the area, then they would be appropriate for consideration on that basis. But I hesitate to prejudge on the basis of
So it's a question for people to apply and be considered on a case-by-case basis.
Yep, okay. I think we also have some clarification from David as well.
Yeah, I just want to expand on Jeremy's bus point, and just to clarify in terms of the size of the vehicle, we don't differentiate between bus types. So if it's a vehicle that's adapted for more than 9 persons, it's categorized as a bus and falls within the exemption.
Okay. I think that might have hopefully helped.
So just to clarify,
Or not.
the size of the vehicle, because it's over 9, if it's over 9, then it's counted as a bus and it's exempt anyway.
It would be exempt as a bus. Yes.
Okay, lovely. Thank you very much.
Okay, good. Right. Anything outside of blue badge exemptions? Councillor Slatter, are you going to talk about blue badges again? Okay.
I am. I'm going to apologise. Both Councillor Count and I have quoted from a government publication about the blue badge parking scheme. We need to make sure that we're not putting our county council officers in harm's way, because they are thinking that's what they're applying, whereas we are talking about the Mill Road bus gate. Now, clearly, Jeremy knows what we're talking about, but I want it to be really clear that those people who are answering the phone or the email correspondence that our residents bring forward do see it as a distinct thing. Yes, this is not about where people park, it's where people go. And it's not just a matter of 9-seater minibuses, because we all know there are organisations that enable people to come out of their own homes by them getting into other people's cars with an escort that they trust, all these sort of things. We're well familiar with the problems some people have. And we want to be able to know that a trusted organisation that is using drivers like that, we all have to register our number plate. We have, if we claim expenses, it goes through a system. There will be a system that a decent organisation whereby they can give us that information we need about that particular vehicle. And Jeremy's nodding his head, which reassures me. So I think I'm close to being able to vote for this if we have got that flexibility and we're not treating it, we're going to look foolish if we are enforcing the rules that apply to a parking scheme, when what we want is a minimum, the right sort of journey scheme. Yeah.
Jeremy, I think we're probably looking at you for a response to this one. Can you offer reassurance?
I think it is fair to say that an individual nominating a vehicle to be on the permitted vehicle list, obviously that is for them to determine whether they feel safe with the vehicle and the driver in question. For an organisation that provides services of this nature, there are generally more stringent requirements on drivers, and that would obviously be part of the county council's consideration of any such latitude that can be given.
Okay, thank you. Members, Councillor Ray, please.
Just a comment that surely somebody driving someone to hospital or to a medical appointment as part of a organised and regulated scheme would come under Section 6A of the TRO as an ambulance taking someone to hospital.
I don't know. Can officers clarify that? I wouldn't like to guess.
I accept that there is also the flexibility that Jeremy has offered.
I think such vehicles aren't necessarily ambulances, though wouldn't necessarily have exemption, is my understanding. However, ambulances would have exemption.
I also think it helpful to say that the blue badge scheme is here, as I understand it, being used as a mechanism to identify disabled people and their carers, but that the exemption from fines and going through the bus gate is through the registration of such vehicle number plates. So whether or not the person holding the blue badge is present in the car is irrelevant.
Members did refer to the level of trust we need to place in organisations and our public. And while I'm not going to sit here and say that I expect the compliance with this to be perfect on that basis. That is the steer that officers are working with.
Okay, thank you, Jeremy.
And very last one from me is the wish list. So I talked about the wish list about the public realm, and the wish list is now on the blue badges and how that scheme will operate. It is flawed. The TRO in front of us, blue badge only. That's TRO in front of us. We've heard Philippa Slapper and Anna Bradnam interrogate officers repeatedly, trying to get the position that they wanted this be in so they could pass it. And what you got back was people dancing on a pinhead, promising visions of the future. This TRO isn't ready. I'd like us to go to square one, and I'd like an honest conversation about alternative measures, tidal flow, congestion only, HGV, etc., instead of just pushing this through the way, because it's what you've been trying to do, not you in person, but the county council been trying to do for the last couple of years.